Hey guys, so I wanted to talk about diagrams. Now this is something I posted about a while back, but I just wanted to try and sort of hammer home. I love diagrams, they're really, really good. They are so much easier than having to communicate things through text. There's that whole adage, a picture paints 1,000 words, and it is so true in technology. The most complicated code can be explained really quite simply, usually if it's good code, using diagrams. So anyway, when you're drawing diagrams, there is a whole thing around what notation should you use, and the notation arguments, whatever, they're a bit boring, really. I mean, what I tend to find is if I'm whiteboarding, I won't use heavy notation of anything. Sometimes I'll sort of get a bit distracted, which is obviously distracting for everyone. But if you're just drawing something on a board, then circles, squares, arrows, etc., they all work really well. If you're putting models into a system, then obviously there will be specific notation within those diagrams, and hopefully people will have access to the help manuals or whatever, and they should be able to understand what the actual notations mean. But I just wanted to cover off some sort of simple tips in terms of diagrams that hopefully will be useful when you're putting documentation together, because it's certainly something I've seen, and I just sort of almost get to the point of pulling my hair out because I just can't understand how someone can think a diagram done in a certain way can be useful. And quite often it's a shame because the person's trying to communicate a really good idea or something they've done really well, but it's the communication that's the problem. So, diagram tips. Keep them specific. Now, what I mean with that is if you have a sequence diagram, and I'm talking UML here, but imagine you've got different components along top. It's just again sort of basic diagram with very little ceremony in terms of actually what's happening here. So you have a diagram, a sequence diagram, and it's all about your website. So you have web page, and you have services, and let's have some sort of like data store type thing here. Yeah. Now you have this diagram, and you want to communicate. What do you want to communicate? So you draw in all the details. You want to show how this works, how the system works, how brilliant it is, and how you thought of every single eventuality that could possibly happen, so that it's reliable, user understands what's happened, etc. Now, specific. You have a diagram and you call it login. Oopsie. User login. That's that. So, user login. There we go. Awesome. What it does is it tells me what you're trying to convey to me as a reader. User logs in. Now, imagine you also, and obviously each one of these operations would have, each one of these calls would have sort of specific operations. So, user logs in, yeah? So let's just say login just for the sake of clarity. And next one, you have now, squiggly writing you can't see, another awesome aspect of diagrams. You have login, so this is like customer login. And then you have here, which is administrator creates a user in the MI system. Now, that's going to make your diagram look more complicated, which is not good. But also, it's just really confusing in terms of what you're trying to communicate. If you put in customer logs in, and then you've got, users created an MI system, it's not specific. Now, it might seem a good idea if this one was a bit boring because you didn't have many lines, but imagine, you have to say, okay, well, we've got a new system and it's going to be, I don't know what, sort of picking up requests. We're going to make it, sort of maybe messaging based or whatever, and it's got a fulfillment piece which is then logged and sent off to the security team, etc. If you have a diagram that's too cluttered already, and it's doing too many things, it's really difficult to extend it. So I have seen this where people have made sequence diagrams, specifically sequence diagrams, which just cover too much stuff. And I would even go to say, I've chosen a bit of a random one here, but if you have, user logs in, it's quite a key flow. It might be quite boring, as far as you're concerned. User logs in, and then, buys a product. Again, the way this will turn out is it will look very big. And there's nothing sort of arguably incorrect about the fact that a user logs in and buys a product. But just in terms of communicating a message, in terms of the flow on how something works, it's far better to be specific and say, this is a diagram for user logs in, this is a diagram for user buys a product, and create them as separate diagrams. It also helps in terms of reusability as well, because you can refer to the login, for instance, on buys a product, looks at their balance, registers for a service, etc., etc. So that's the first one, keep it specific. Second one, provide explanations. So you have a diagram and you have and that's it. You have something called A with some interface on login, and you have B which has fulfill. Now, I don't even know whether I've done the diagram notation right on this, but it's just really just to try and set the point. If that's all you're giving the user, if that's all you're giving the reader of the diagram, it's really difficult to understand. And unless you want them to ask the question, what does this mean? Which you might do, it's going to result in them asking, what does this mean? So what I'd say with this is, you will have a reason for doing this diagram, I would hope. If it's been auto-generated or something, maybe just put it somewhere else where someone can't see it. But don't make it so that your diagrams need explanation, because the problem with this is, I make a diagram like this, and time goes on, 3 months later, someone says, oh, Mike, what was the reason for doing this diagram? I can't remember. Or maybe I can remember the reason. They say, I wasn't sure, why is login in A and not B? I'm probably not going to remember, really. So, there's this real problem. It's not just about communicating to other people what the diagram means. It's also remembering what the diagram's meant to mean. And, you may have it in a document with some description, under the diagram or whatever. However, I would always say, provide explanations. Now, you could go the other way, and that would be a bit crowded, sort of Times Square type approach where you just have thousands of comments. But one thing you can do on most diagrams is you can provide a comment, yeah? Now, that is one way of doing it. And this might be, comment, login is on package A because it needs to be reused by package X, Y, and Z. Package B has fulfill in it because we wanted to keep the fulfillment separate from the authorization and authentication. Please note that the next version will have got rid of the dependencies, or whatever it is. those comments will provide you, or should provide you, please make them, with enough explanation that people don't need to ask you the questions about what it means or what you're trying to say. They can ask questions about, okay, why have you done it this way or whatever else, but this should be able to stand on its own. Some diagram tools, don't require you to put comments on, and this is really the Times Square type thing, is, you don't want to be in a position where you've got thousands of comments all over the screen. So you either need to sort of make them count, or alternatively, some diagram tools allow you to essentially have like a script against the diagram, where, a bit like, using PowerPoint as an example, you've got a tab where you can do your slides, but you can do a sort of script underneath. So use either comments, or if you can, sort of scripts against the diagrams. That will make it so that you can remember what you're actually talking about, or what you're trying to convey, one thing. It should make it easier for people to understand diagrams as well. And also it means they can sort of double check what you were thinking as well, because you may have made mistakes, but if you've got it down there, they can say, okay, well, that will make sense. I'm pretty sure actually that dependency arrow is the wrong way and should be a proper arrow triangle. Anyway, so that's the provide explanations. Aim at the right level. So, what I mean with this is, I've seen this quite a lot recently, and it is a sort of personal bugbear. In the same way, you're talking about using scripts to convey what you meant in the diagram. I've also seen diagrams where, for instance, this is a diagram showing all the components of the web app that we're building. So, component firewall, component compute, component storage, and it will have lovely colours on. But in terms of actually saying any difference from any of the other billions and billions of web apps out there, there's no difference. And I think that the problem with this is that it's almost like a lack of, imagine if you've got a language and it's only got 5 words. You're going to have a very difficult time trying to use that language to communicate any sort of meanings. It seems to be a similar sort of problem where people have been given notation and there just isn't that sort of level of granularity. So I would personally advise caution with using vendor diagram notation. It will lock you into the vendor, and I know that might sound a bit like heresy, but there is always a risk that your company wants to move to another vendor. But also, if someone's asked you to communicate all the components within your web app, double check with them, but I'm pretty sure they aren't just asking what types of feature you're using in a cloud hosting platform. They're wanting to know, do you have things like security services? Do you have sort of logging? Do you have configuration services? Do you have what business services do you have? What data stores do you have? Are they separate? Are they specific by domain? Loads and loads of different things. There's a massive difference between really showing the street on Google Maps where you live versus just having an arrow pointing to the globe. And what I feel at the moment is that people have almost just been asked to do diagrams for diagrams' sake. So aim at the right level. If this was at a really high level, tell me what we're using. Personally, I wouldn't even use a diagram, because you could just say, we're using sort of firewall capabilities, web application firewall capabilities. We're using compute, and yeah, we've got storage as well. But it doesn't really help much. Not really. I mean, it's almost an opener to a conversation. Okay, what of those are you using? So that's really aiming at the right level. Last one. And I'm going to stop, although there are probably billions, so maybe I'll do a follow-on. Last one. It sounds very simple. Also, if you're a bit cheeky, then it probably sounds really unfun as well. So, versioning. When you've done a diagram, version it. What this will do is it will mean that when people read it, they know it's not a work in progress. They know that one of the components on the diagram is not going to be removed. They know that all those spelling mistakes they see, they can feed back on and say, are you sure we should be spelling it that way? All those aspects, all the feedback that people can give you on a diagram is essentially dependent on the fact that everyone's looking at the same version of that diagram, and it is, as far as you're concerned, in a state to be reviewed and be fed back on. Also, just away from the feedback, if I provide a diagram and I say, this is these are the web components, these are the sort of services, this is where we're storing the data, these are the systems we're integrating with, and I give that to people, and then they feed back and they say, oh, actually, I think we need to integrate with this system, or we need to integrate with this system. And I say, oh, don't worry, I've updated it already. In fact, it's different. Then the diagram's not really doing what it was meant to be doing, which is the diagram was meant to be communicating what is being built. Not 3 weeks ago, it looked like this. So versioning is really, really key. Use versioning. Versioning is sort of a topic in itself, but just say signed off version or whatever, maybe use a comment, maybe put in a title, and then people can all be on the same page, because these sort of like just in time type views are really not very helpful. If you are using a tool that does just in time modeling, it's sort of showing, say on a map again, you're in point A, your point B is your destination, but let's ignore point B and let's just track where Mike is at the moment. And that doesn't help, because what it means is that you're just tracking what I'm doing rather than what I'm intending to do. And the whole point about diagrams is to actually take something that's quite complicated and communicate it in a more simpler way, so that people can feed back to you, they can understand how the system works, and everyone can be going to that same destination rather than just meandering around aimlessly. So that is the end of the video with regards to diagramming. I can cover more details in terms of diagrams. I will need to look them up, as proven by my slightly dubious package diagram array, but hopefully that's useful just in terms of some tips in doing diagramming. And really, the problem with all these things is it sounds a bit like preaching with regards to, diagram, this is how you do diagrams. But if you don't do this, you run the risk of people coming back, pointing the finger of blame at you, and really, if you don't stick to these sort of rules, then you've only got yourself to blame. So this is hopefully helping you to be better, and also make sure that you're working in more of a safer environment in terms of people know what you're going to be doing, they can understand what you're trying to communicate, there's not the misunderstandings, and yeah, just really communication is key with diagrams. So anyway, hopefully you liked this video. If you did, please press the like button, and if you want to see some more, please subscribe. Thanks. Bye.